Con lo cual, si el Banco Central toca la tasa de interés, está tocando los precios. O sea, te imaginas que para un libertario como en mi caso, o sea, es una cosa, digamos, que no hay forma de digerírsela.
Alright guys, so it's quite obvious Javier Milei doesn't like central banks. He hates how central planners are manipulating interest rates, how they are interfering with prices. Now, there are just so many things wrong with his statement, but let's assume he's right. And if so, why are you dollarizing your economy? You are just swapping out one central bank for the other. And as you'll see, this isn't really a currency problem per se, but an entire economy out of balance. But Milei is hell-bent on embracing the US dollar to the bitter end. He has given Argentina a blueprint towards dollarization, and it's going to happen after his reforms that are already causing a ton of chaos. Milei wants to pay down their local liabilities, reform the financial system, and then allow the peso to compete with the dollar freely. So it's going to be an open currency competition. And this sounds utopian, but there's a real problem with his next statement. It sounds like Milei is forcing Argentina to choose the dollar at all costs. He's using central bank tactics to push people out of the local currency. The central bank would stop printing pesos, allowing the dollar to become the dominant currency. In effect, the central bank of Argentina will become a relic of the past. But Milei will still control the value of the peso. He will only devalue it by 2% a month even if inflation is 4 times higher. He's basically trying to reduce the supply of pesos in the market. This is an artificial control to get people to abandon it. So if you want to transact and buy stuff, you need more dollars to do so. However, there's one big problem here. Milei is putting his entire economy in the hands of the US central bank, which is the Federal Reserve. But the Fed's duty is to direct monetary policy not for Argentina, but for the US. It's important we understand this. If inflation in the US is too high, the Fed will hike interest rates to push it down. But because Argentina uses only the dollar, it makes their transaction currency more expensive. And what is Argentina exactly? They are an emerging economy reliant on exports to the world. Suddenly, their exports could rise in price, and this will devastate exporters in the country. And here's the main takeaway: Argentina's business cycle is not aligned with the US. America is the ultimate consumer economy. Argentina isn't. They are supposed to be a producer and exporter to the world. And in the event of dollarization, the Federal Reserve will be the master of the country. American monetary policy will affect Milei's economy. It will control how competitive it is, and this is one extra vulnerability that will boomerang back down the line. This next chart is extremely important. It tells you the US and Argentine economy is not correlated at all. Compared to Argentina, the US correlation is only at 0.74. How the US drives economic growth is very different from Milei's country. The US is not a big commodity exporter relative to their size. They are a service-based economy and massive consumers of everything. Argentina's monetary policy can't be based on that. The Eurozone is also far apart. Argentina is more correlated with the rest of South America, which should be a little obvious. But you won't believe which country is most correlated to Argentina. It's China at 0.99, and that's because Beijing is a massive exporter of goods to the world. It's hilarious, but this is the hard data. The Chinese central bank policies are more correlated with Argentina than the Federal Reserve, which means Argentina should be using the yuan instead of the US dollar. But as we all know, that isn't going to happen. Milei has thrown his lot with the West, and there's no way out now. Very soon, we'll have this on the streets of Argentina.
They're ripping pesos up and throwing it in the air.
The issue here isn't about the dollar or the peso. Argentina can use gold as a national currency, and it will be useless if the economy doesn't turn around. The question is if Milei can revive the economy, if he can cut government spending and increase exports fast enough before everything collapses. the Argentine economy shrank in March. It's the biggest decline since the 2020 lockdowns. GDP fell by 8.4%, which is a big deal. It's almost double digits. When the economy shrinks, it is deflating. And normally you need some sort of stimulus to reverse this in a hurry. But Milei is trapped. He can't do that without making inflation even worse. And this is the real battle Argentina has to face. It's all about reviving economic growth no matter what currency he chooses. And because he wants to abandon the peso for the dollar, his central bank tools are very limited now. And unless he can get the economy back on track, getting more currency into the country will be very difficult. Investors will be afraid of buying dollar bonds issued by Argentina. More companies like HSBC will start leaving the country because of instability. They would rather eat $1 billion loss than stay in, which is a very big wake-up call. To me, Argentina's fate is still a big coin toss. Using the dollar as a stopgap currency might be a good idea, but to replace it entirely with the USD is very dangerous. You'll be at the mercy of the Federal Reserve. The Argentine economy, once again, is not the same as the US economy. Now, while Milei is busy fighting inflation, China is starting a new battle with the West. Remember, the trade war Biden started well, it's starting to backfire in real time. Even Biden himself back in 2020 realized that the trade war with China isn't a good idea. It will just hurt the US economy. This is very hilarious.
To counter China's influence. Would you keep the tariffs?
No, hey, look, who said Trump's
would-
idea is a good one? Who said Trump's idea is a good one?
Some feel that
Some 2 or 3 people. Manufacturing has gone in recession. Agriculture lost billions of dollars that taxpayers had to pay. We're going after China in the wrong way.
But Biden today has unleashed the Kraken. 100% tax on Chinese EVs is as good as announcing a trade war. As we've said before, Beijing is not defenseless. They have a big consumer market that the West values, and that's why many companies from Volkswagen all the way to McDonald's still operate in China. By weaponizing the US consumer market, Biden just gave China a very bright idea. He gave them the perfect excuse. Why don't we do the same to the West? Beijing has signaled they are planning a 25% car tariff on all imports with large engines. This, of course, is going to impact US and EU car makers the most. 1/3 of China's total auto imports will get hit with import taxes, and this will be very crippling. And here's the funny part, China is still playing by the rules. According to the World Trade Organization, China is permitted to hike tariffs to 25%. And this is going to affect 250,000 auto imports going forward. As Biden warned earlier, a trade war could push Western manufacturing into recession. A 25% tariff might sound small, but it's not. Just a 10% increase is enough to knock out foreign competition in China. Chinese companies are already fighting tooth and nail with each other. They are pushing margins down in the country to grab more market share. And if China slaps American and European cars with a 25% import tax, it's game over. There's a reason why Chinese brands themselves like NIO are losing billions selling cars in China. Competition is extremely tough on the mainland, and these are automakers embedded in the Chinese supply chain already. They are already manufacturing within the country itself. If NIO or BYD are struggling, Western brands have no hope with these new import taxes. GM, Ford, and other US cars will be outpriced selling into China. We must remember that Chinese consumers have a ton of other choices from local brands. The quality is just as good, sometimes even superior, and the price is much cheaper than all the Western imports. But the biggest losers will be the EU once again. EU countries like Germany and Slovakia are the most exposed to China's retaliation. The pink line here shows us the total exports from the EU. Nearly $1 billion worth of big engine cars were sold from Europe into China in March, 3 times more than the US. And if China goes ahead with this, it will decimate European manufacturing. This isn't good when EU industries are stagnating. Biden's trade war with Beijing has big implications. This retaliation is a blanket tariff against the West. It won't just hurt US car makers but those in Europe as well. And this might only be the first salvo. the trade war would likely escalate to new levels that we haven't even thought about it yet. But let's end this with Japan. And let's do an update on the Japanese yen because it's looking really bad. We have seen two interventions and tens of billions of dollars spent, and that didn't change much. The yen is the weakest since 1990, a 34-year low. It's at 155 to the dollar, and the economy is starting to feel it. The common narrative we hear from mainstream economists goes along these lines that a weaker yen is great for Japan's exports, it's great for the manufacturing base, and because Japan can export more, the economy will grow. But that's not always the case. A weaker yen also means Japan's imports cost more. It's a two-way street, guys, and the effects are starting to manifest in Japan's economy. Tokyo is back in a trade deficit because the yen is collapsing. All of their imports, especially energy, now cost more to import. And look at this from another angle. A trade deficit here means Japan's exports are beneath the value of the imports they bring in. Japan is supposed to be an export giant and net exporter, but for over 2 years, their balance of trade looks just like the US, a major consumer. They are recording deficits almost every other month, and this is a problem. Japan is not like the US, they can't print dollars. If this continues, Japan's consumers will get clobbered. We'll see domestic consumption crash even further. What is the end result? Economic stagnation. Exporters might be feeling great, but if local Japanese consumers continue to fall, we'll see an economic crisis up ahead. Q1 GDP has gone negative again, falling by 2%, and the numbers confirm consumers aren't spending. They are hiding their cash under the mattress, Japan style. Private consumption is down by 0.7%, much more than the 0.2 estimates. Business spending from companies declined by 0.8% as well. Once again, worse than the estimates of 0.5. The same goes for the other metrics. This is forcing the Bank of Japan to make a very difficult choice. Do we spend billions more to prop up the yen, or do we raise interest rates and risk blowing up the debt bomb? The BOJ has to make a decision soon because things are going to remain horrible for quite a while. The Fed is going to stay higher for longer. And here's a critical statement from Governor Waller from the Federal Reserve.
The economy now seems to be evolving a bit closer to what the committee expected. Nevertheless, in the absence of significant weakening in the labor market, I need to see several more months of good inflation data before I would be comfortable supporting and easing in the stance of monetary policy.
So it's a few more months of pain for Japan at the very least. Interest rates will remain elevated. Until US inflation comes down significantly, no cuts will be coming. Now, I kind of suspect the BOJ will have to intervene one or even two more times. They have very few options left. Raising rates to an effective level is impossible. Japan's inflation is close to 3%, but they can't hike rates to 3% tomorrow. It will blow up the entire economy. They are effectively trapped. But let's circle back to Argentina for a bit here. I'm not saying that dollarization is the worst idea as a stopgap measure. It might make sense. It could even be a good idea. The problem now is using the dollar as your national currency forever, scraping your central bank and ditching the peso entirely for the greenback. It just gives too much power to the US in both monetary and foreign policy. And I don't know about you, but recent events in the world should be quite clear. This isn't the best idea around. Javier Milei is playing with fire and things could backfire down the road. But let me know what you think, guys. Is dollarization the answer for Argentina? And will China ramp up Biden's trade war? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.